I had a day for the ages yesterday. If you were at Michigan Stadium yesterday, you had a day for the ages. If you watched on TV from Seattle, Washington, you had a day for the ages. Michigan 42, Ohio State 27. It's funny how this game works, and it's funny how sometimes we talk about padlock stats on this show a lot, but sometimes you just think you see padlock moments. Now, when we say padlock stats, obviously we're talking about a number that if you would have known it Friday about the box score, you would have already known the outcome to the game. Well, padlock moments kind of work the same way. Here's how a padlock moment works, but some of them are fake. So here's how a fake padlock moment works. If I were to have shown you a moment in time, and that moment in time is it's early in this game, and Michigan's driving, and I think they're up 7-0, but they throw a pick on the goal line. Looks like they're about to take a 14-0 lead. Instead, they throw a pick, and Ohio State takes it the other way, and it feels like the momentum turns early. If I were to just show you that and cut the game off, what would you think? You'd think that, 3.5 quarters later, the likely talking point is, boy, Michigan started fast, but once that turnover happened, the snowball got kicked down the hill, and it was all Buckeyes. That's why it's a fake padlock moment, because that's not the way it worked out. In reality, you want to know what the padlock moment was? The padlock moment was Cam Brown early in the second half, ripping that helmet off of Roman Wilson, and the subsequent reaction from Michigan. You see, Cam Brown rips the helmet off Roman Wilson. That's not what made the moment, man, because this kind of stuff could happen. What made the moment is Ohio State did not get the reaction they expected. In years past, Ohio State had rightfully come to expect Michigan to tuck tail, and they're looking at the backs of maize and blue jerseys. That's not what happened this time. They were looking at chests of Michigan offensive linemen, because that's the attitude that team's played with all year. That's the attitude they played with yesterday, and I'm telling you, standing 20 yards from it, you could feel it. You could feel it on the sideline. You could see it in those players' emotions and reactions. Boy, you could feel it in the crowd. That's not where that started, though. Where it started was really the first half, when Michigan started to learn that that game plan that Jim Harbaugh has told us we're going to execute on this team here from Columbus, Ohio, we're doing it. We're starting to own the line of scrimmage. We're moving the ball. If anything, we've stopped ourselves. I guarantee you that's what they're feeling going into halftime. But then a funny thing happens. A little story time. And Colin, get that tunnel video ready, because it's almost time to roll it. So yours truly has never been to the big house before. So I walk in there and I scope it out, and I learn what a lot of you have long since known. There's only one tunnel in the whole building. It's kind of like the Cotton Bowl. Some of the old buildings are like that. Well, here's what that means. What that means is if you only got one tunnel, that means that you've got to share a tunnel for both teams. It's happened. I mean, they've played many a game in this stadium, right? Just in case, when we have that kind of architectural anomaly, I normally go up the tunnel about a minute early before the half. So there I am. I walk up the tunnel, and here comes Ohio State off the field, and Michigan is following. So I say, what's the worst that could happen? I waste a 16th of a battery on the iJosh, so I pull this bad boy out, and I start recording. Colin, let's show the people, if they haven't already seen, this thing's got like 4 million views, went all over the world yesterday. Here's what we actually saw happening in the tunnel. Now, I want you to remember, Ohio State has just kicked a field goal, so it's getting close to half, and then it's halftime, and Ohio State's kicked a field goal. I want to say it's a one-possession game at this point. And so I'm up the tunnel, and there are a lot of people up there. It's very crowded. Let me know if we have that video. And so here comes Ohio State. We're going to play some Nat sound on this. Normally we don't do this. We just play it VO only. And you've already seen this if you've watched a lot of the broadcast. If you haven't, here's what's happening. Colin very, very classily blurred out some things that you don't need to see if the kiddos are watching at home. No, we're not just blurring out helmets there. And so this stuff's happening out of the purview of even the Fox cameras. I gave them permission to use it, but we didn't have a Fox camera up here. So it's just the iJosh and a bunch of officials. Here's the best part. You got equipment guys getting into it. You've got officials blowing whistles. I was waiting for a flag to be thrown, even though we're in commercial break and it's at halftime. So this is all happening, and if you're in the stadium, you're unaware. And if you're watching at home, you're unaware. This is why we try and get the angle we do when we go to games, because this is the kind of access that we get that normally you're not going to get when you're watching on TV. So that's why we try and position ourselves where we do, when we do, when we go to games. So this is what you didn't get to see, okay? So then, and that's good, Colin, I appreciate it. So then we come back, and the broadcast is back on. It's the third quarter. With that in mind, then I want you to contextualize what you saw happen. with that helmet being ripped off, after knowing that's already happened up the tunnel, and then think about what it meant to that Michigan sideline. Because when you saw him score on 3 consecutive possessions coming out of the half, that's what had precipitated all that, or at very least, that's what had led up to all that. The scene was pretty surreal. So then, this game turns into a clinic on the freeze point. The freeze point we talked about when we broke this game down all last week. Remember what the freeze point was? The freeze point was essentially the answer to the question we thought you would find yourself asking in the latter portion of this game when we thought it would be a dogfight. And that question was going to be, in all likelihood, wait a second. How can this Ohio State team that led 49-0 over Michigan State, a team that beat this Michigan team for that matter, how can this team that led 49-0 just 7 days ago all of a sudden be in a fight for their lives? How could this offense seemingly grind to a halt? Well, it didn't grind to a halt. It was limited, but Michigan scored. Michigan had offensive success of their own, firstly. Secondly, the gap in this sport is almost never as wide as a scoreboard can sometimes indicate that it is. This is not baseball. They score in 3s and 7s in this game, which means theoretically one play can create a 14-point gap between teams. Or, to put a finer point on it, and to put it in proper context for this comparison, one of your corners' inability or one of your defensive ends' inability to set the edge or to run, respectively, with a wide receiver could be the difference on any one given play of 14 points. My point is, if you just change one of those little things, if you just change the concept of getting pressure on a quarterback, 49-0 becomes you trailing at the half. That's the freeze point. But if you don't meet it, you don't have a prayer. But Michigan did meet the freeze point yesterday. In fact, they far exceeded the freeze point. We were wondering last week, metaphorically, where were they at? Were they right around freezing? Were they 30 degrees? Were they 25 degrees? Well, they were plenty low enough. I don't know the exact number. They were plenty low enough yesterday. That's the freeze point. And that's why you can't let these results week to week fool you into thinking some team's invincible or, some team can't get up from the dead to save their lives. There were 2 things that stood out to me in addition that I just wanted to comment on right quick. I grew up in the South, obvi, and I know a lot of people have always talked about Big Ten weather. They've talked about football weather in the late fall, early winter portion of the season in the Big Ten. They're right. They're right. Folks who talk about Big Ten weather, they're right about it. I don't know how people function. I don't know how C.J. Stroud functioned yesterday. I just don't get it. I mean, I'm so in awe of the ability for a kid of any age or a pro player of any age at a position like quarterback to go into a place where it's in the upper 20s, and at some portions of this game we had nice driving snow. I'm sure it looked really good on TV. It was not coming down straight either. It was coming down sideways, which means depending on the direction you're going, it's right in your face. It was a very, very surreal scene, but it also made me think, and I had a couple of people in my ear also kind of conveying the same message. Hey, when we talk about Southern teams not ever coming to play in this is what we mean. Like, do you really think that a team that's used to 65 degrees just seamlessly goes up and down the field in this? Well, my answer used to be yeah. My answer now is I'm not so sure anymore. But I also think that weather affected the outcome of this game. Now, of course, the old time-tested retort to that is they both had to play in the same weather. That's true. That's just like saying, hey, COVID disproportionately impacted Penn State relative to New Mexico last year. Well, they both had to deal with COVID. Yeah, that doesn't mean COVID didn't disproportionately affect one team over the other. Weather can disproportionately affect one team over the other, too. Ohio State wasn't as ready for it as Michigan was. Ohio State wasn't as built to deal with it as Michigan was. It's not an excuse. That's actually a credit to one coaching staff and a question mark for another coaching staff that I'm sure they're already asking themselves. Second thing is, I think people have been wrong about the Big House. Now, I'm telling you, I'd never been there before. So I had only heard the stereotype about Michigan Stadium. And the stereotype had been partly due to architecture and partly due to the nature of the crowd. It wasn't a hostile environment. It wasn't intimidating. And, of course, when I talk about architecture, I'm talking about the bowl design where more noise is released than is captured by the double-decker stadiums, the tiered stadiums. I don't know about the reputation of the Big House because this is the first time I've been there, and obviously I picked the right one. But my friends, I can tell you definitively that Michigan Stadium impacted this game yesterday, and the crowd impacted this game yesterday. I can't remember how many false starts Ohio State had, but even if you get past false starts, there were botched snaps. There were all kinds of different procedural issues for Ohio State, and it's not like they were unaware of what they were going into. I mean, that's a testament to a crowd and an environment. That's home field advantage. And so you can talk all you want to about the cheese and wine crowd there and how they don't make that place intimidating. That place had teeth yesterday. And that's all I can go on because that's the only time I've been there. But this was the way a turnaround had to happen. I mean, this is an incredible story. If you really think about where Jim Harbaugh was and where this program was just one short year ago, we got to this time of year and they had already canceled this game. And we were talking about Jim Harbaugh, was he going to be out? Was he just going to move on to an NFL job? And they end up, offering, and he accepts the reduced salary. But you got to have a turnaround. Well, everyone out there had an opinion to offer Jim Harbaugh about how he should execute a turnaround. And he stayed true to himself, and he stayed true to the principles he believes in. I didn't think it'd work. I mean, I'll be totally real with you. I never would have envisioned this. I don't think Michigan fans would have envisioned this. But his response, as everyone was in both ears telling him what he should do, his response was to stay the course, essentially. And it's the way a turnaround has to happen. That doesn't mean everyone who adheres to their principles and values is going to succeed, because some people just aren't good enough. I mean, that's the jungle. But if you don't stick to your core beliefs and principles, even if you do temporarily succeed, it's going to be short term, because you can't fake it at this level for very, very long. But Jim Harbaugh didn't. That's what is so sustainable about what they're doing right now, and what you can take comfort in knowing if you're a Michigan fan. There's nothing popcornish or microwave-ish about this. There's no gimmick about it. That team yesterday, this team for that matter you've seen all year, that's a Jim Harbaugh Michigan team. That's the way he's always wanted it to look. They've just made it happen this year. Supreme credit to Michigan. This was a great experience, great environment, but it was a great win. And now they got to get themselves up to go to the Big Ten championship game. That's right, Michigan to the Big Ten championship game against Iowa. And the Wolverines open as a 10.5-point favorite. That game is set for Saturday. It's a late game. It's 8 Eastern kickoff. It's in Indianapolis. I am told that weather will not be an issue in the Steve Wiltfong Dome there in Indianapolis. That name is pending, and it's got my endorsement.